According to the National Center for Children in Poverty, among the 72.4 million children under the age of 18 in the U.S., 41% live below the poverty threshold. Of these, approximately 29.8 million children live in low-income families, 14 million children live in poor families, and 6.2 million children are living in deep poverty. A plethora of events have refocused a spotlight on the economic inequalities that pose a threat to the social, political, and economic health and well-being of our diverse nation. Research has shown that education is a key stepping stone to rising above poverty and pursuing a better life. Poverty has negative impacts on children's health, social, emotional, and cognitive development, behavior, and educational outcomes. The reality is that children who grow up in poverty face more barriers to education than those that don't, and thus there is a great potential to extend the poverty cycle to yet another generation. In recent years, federal policy has begun to incorporate social, emotional, and behavioral factors into education accountability metrics. School climate initiatives, anti-bullying work, positive behavior supports, and discipline reform are increasingly influencing the day-to-day practice of educators. As a result of the Children's Mental Health Act of 2003, the Illinois State Board of Education adopted the Illinois Social Emotional Learning Standards. The drafting of the 10 SEL standards along with goals, age-appropriate benchmarks, and performance descriptors was a collaborative effort between ISB and the Illinois Children's Mental Health Partnership, with a lot of technical support from the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, known as CASEL. Mandates that add layers of curriculum and programs will not necessarily ensure that all students learn to know the good, love the good, and do the good. School leaders across the United States are being called upon to exercise their authority to act as agents for change, to build school cultures that not only focus on academics, but also on the moral education of the rising generation. Dr. Marvin Berkowitz and Dr. Mindy Beer suggest that moral education is an overarching term that encompasses social emotion learning, civics, as well as character education. A recent Montrose podcast entitled The Sweet Spot, where social emotional learning, civics, and character education meet, focused on the value of an integrated system to care for and support the moral education and development of all children. One key point made by guest speaker Mark Brackett centered on the critical role of the school leader's knowledge and skills in creating and sustaining a school culture that supports the development of the whole child. Brackett's comments echo those of Marvin Berkowitz and his belief that the principle of the school is the key to the quality and success of both the academic achievement and the moral development of the students in his or her care. Dr. Berkowitz emphasizes that for schools to become moral institutions, they need leaders who understand the complexities, prioritize, and have the competencies to nurture and sustain cultures of character. Just for your listening pleasure, I have placed a link to that podcast if you are interested in listening to the full podcast. This is entirely option. It is, I warn you, 56 minutes long. Aspiring school leaders may be homegrown, they may be native to the school context, and or even seasoned in teacher leadership roles. Others may be novices who step into leadership positions as strangers or outsiders. Some enter into planned transitions and are charged with maintaining the culture, while others make unplanned transitions and are charged with disrupting the status quo. Regardless of the context and challenges, all school leaders face daily dilemmas within complex and changing environments. Dr. Michael Fullen emphasizes that as our society has become more and more complex, there is an increasing need for sophisticated school leaders who lead with a moral purpose, a moral compass. Particularly in poverty-stricken environments, school leaders must see themselves as central in building network among the school, community, and the home. Poverty affects the overall well-being of children and directly influences the work of teachers and administrators in high-poverty schools. While knowledge and skills in the area of management and operations provides an essential and traditional foundation for school leaders, The current environment underscores the critical importance of balancing these bases with the study of the moral dimensions of leadership. This presentation proposes building the schema of aspiring school leaders, such as yourselves, in the sociology of morality and moral education. Yuri Brofenbrenner, a co-founder of the National Head Start program and widely regarded as one of the world's leading scholars in developmental psychology, child rearing, and human ecology, the interdisciplinary domain he created, died in his home in Ithaca, New York on September 25, 2005. He was 88 years old. Brofenbrenner's ideas and his ability to translate them into operational research models and effective social policies spurred the creation in 1965 of Head Start, the federal child development program for low-income children and their families. In 1979, Brofenbrenner further developed his thinking into the groundbreaking theory on the ecology of human development. That theoretical model transformed the way many social and behavioral scientists approach the study of human beings and their environment. It led to new directions in basic research and to applications in the design of programs and policies affecting the well-being of children and families, both in the United States and abroad. One challenge for school leaders serving with a moral compass is how to achieve the goal of human flourishing for children living in impoverished contexts. Researcher Charlene Schwartz explored the relationship between poverty and morality and suggested that Brofenbrenner's ecological systems theory is a powerful lens for viewing and articulating the sociology of moral education. Brofenbrenner's work emphasizes the importance of understanding the quality and context of the multiple systems present in the child's environment. During his tenure at Cornell University, Brofenbrenner formulated the ecological systems theory to explain how the inherent qualities of children and their environments interact to influence how they grow and develop. His ecological systems theory holds that we encounter different environments throughout our lifespan that may influence our behavior in varying degrees. Brofenbrenner's ecology mirrors the biological study of interrelationships between organisms in their environment and is concerned with the web of human relationships within their environmental contexts. He viewed human development through a hierarchy of systems composed of 5 levels: the microsystem, the mesosystem, the exosystem, the macrosystem, and eventually the chronosystem. At the center of this ecology is the developing child, with all of his or her cognitive competence, social emotional attributes, and context-relevant belief systems. The microsystem setting is the close and immediate environment in which children establish interpersonal relationships with family, with friends, with classmates, teachers, neighbors, religious establishments, in other words, home, school, and community. The second system is the mesosystem, which involves the interrelationships between the microsystems in the child's life and likewise affecting the child directly. The implication is that microsystems are interconnected and assert influence upon one another. Moving outward from the developing child, the next system is the exosystem, which is composed of the institutions and practices affecting the youth. For example, the exosystem would include the child's parents' workplace or employment status. In addition, government agencies, the legal system, and even the media would be part of a child's exosystem. The macrosystem setting refers to the prevailing attitudes, ideologies, in short, the actual culture the child is born into. These cultural contexts function largely independently of the individual, but nevertheless affect the immediate context within which the child develops. For example, the socioeconomic status of the child and or his family, their ethnicity or race, and the religious cultural practices all are in play here. Brofenbrenner's theory of human development is a theory that was, until Brofenbrenner died in 2005, in a continual state of development. Brofenbrenner was a very self-reflective theorist and fairly frequently noted the changing nature of his theory. His earlier theorizing gave pride of place to the aspects of the context, the famous concepts of microsystem, mesosystem, exosystem, and macrosystem. Later, he, though, engaged in self-criticism for discounting the role the person plays in his or her own development and for focusing too much on the context. Eventually, Brofenbrenner further developed the model by adding the chronosystem, which refers to how the person and environments change over time. He also placed a greater emphasis on the processes and the role of the biological person. Brofenbrenner's chronosystem contains the environmental events and transitions that occur throughout a child's life. This system consists of all the experience that the child or individual has had during his or her lifetime, including environmental events, major life transitions, and historical events. Such changes within the child and his or her environment over time can potentially alter the relationship between the child and his or her environment. It's important to note that a change in any one of the 5 systems can potentially cause a major change in the others. Brofenbrenner's theoretical model has transformed the way many social and behavioral scientists approach the study of human beings and their environments. This work has led to new directions in basic research and to the application in the design of programs and policies affecting the well-being of children, of families, both in the United States and abroad. Brofenbrenner's ecological systems theory is one of the most accepted explanations regarding the influence of social environments on human development. His theory argues that the environment you grow up in affects every facet of your life. Interestingly, Brofenbrenner spent his later years warning that the process that makes human beings human is breaking down, particularly as disruptive trends in American society produce ever more chaos in the lives of America's children. The gravity of the crisis, he warned, threatens the competence and character of the next generation of adults, those destined to be the new leaders of the 21st century. Brofenbrenner's theory defines complex layers of environment, each having an effect on the child's development. His ecological systems theory focuses on the quality and context of the child's environment. As a child develops, the interaction within these environments becomes more and more complex. The school environment represents a microsystem in which children spend a significant amount of time. Some schools operate in ways that ignore the interrelationships between the systems that contribute to the moral ecology of the child, while others either intentionally or instinctively connect those systems to positively impact the development of the children in their care. The reflections and connections that are on the following slides are based on insights that I've gathered over 10 years of supporting school leaders, teachers, and students in Chicago area high-needs parochial schools. Inner-city Catholic schools in the Chicago area work with children who are facing monumental challenges. While the specific needs and goals for these individual schools varied, the common thread was building the capacity of the leaders and teachers to better serve the needs of the students in their care. The individual university school collaborations lasted for a minimum of 2 years and some up to 8 years, with an average partnership of 3 to 4 years. In each variation, the constant elements included collaborating with and coaching the school leader, providing ongoing professional development, and regular coaching support for teachers. The desired outcomes for each partnership school were aimed at changing the culture, improving the social and emotional lives of the students, as well as increasing academic achievement. One of the most successful grant-supported university school partnerships that I was involved in evolved over 4 years with the leadership and staff at School A. The school leader at School A clearly understood and built upon the web of relationships between the child and the microsystems of home, school, and community. Mr. G., the principal at School A, was a seasoned and charismatic educational leader with long-standing practice of building relationships with parents and community members. Mr. G. walked the talk and joined his teachers in each professional development session as the lead learner. During his 37-year-long tenure as the school leader at School A, the school experienced significant demographic shifts, and at the time of the grant partnership, minority students and students of poverty accounted for the vast majority of the student population. Mr. G. seemed to have adapted effortlessly to this demographic shift and regularly invited parents and community leaders into the building to observe, contribute, and celebrate with the school community. He intentionally embraced and nurtured the interrelationships between these microsystems. Mr. G. also had a natural gift for understanding the value of utilizing the interrelationships represented in the mesosystem to benefit his students. This is what children remember, he said. They remember that you cared for them, that you loved them, and you listened. I hope I've always had their best interests at heart. In addition, Mr. G had a clear understanding of how to navigate the larger archdiocesan and local government bodies, exosystems, to solicit various means of support for his school community. As the spiritual leader of a parochial school and a devout Catholic, Mr. G served as the guiding role model of religious beliefs and practices for his faith-based community, thus fulfilling the macrosystem piece of the moral ecology. In his own words, the student population is a lot more diverse now. Everyone gets along, and that's the way it should be. That's the way the world is, or should be, with all races living together. The ongoing record of successes for School A students and alumni appear to affirm the value of understanding and intentionally engaging in Brofenbrenner's 5 ecological systems to positively impact the culture of character in the school. Mr. G used his leadership role to build the capacity of his teachers to support the development of their students within the context of their environment. As a school community, they were able to use positive elements exhibited in the family and community landscape, along with a larger archdiocesan and societal context, to support both the academic and moral education of their students. One somewhat less successful example can be found in the grant-funded university school partnership with School B. Mrs. D was a part of the School B community for over 39 years. During the final 15 years of her time there, she served as the building principal. Much like Mr. G at School A, Mrs. D was devoted to her school community and served as the religious role model for her students and staff. Parents and teachers often noted that she knew every child in the school by name. As a former teacher at School B, Mrs. D was also extremely sensitive to the importance of not only supporting her staff, but maintaining positive relationships. Early in her school leadership role, it could be said that she did understand and successfully balance the interrelationships between familiar microsystems. However, as School B experienced a demographic shift to a largely impoverished minority population, the changing environment presented new and unfamiliar issues. Mrs. D struggled to understand and navigate the new and unfamiliar microsystem that comprised the mesosystem level. During the 4 years of the University School Partnership, Mrs. D worked hard to solicit various means of support for her school community from the Archdiocese and local government bodies, the exosystems. Unfortunately, without the knowledge and understanding of the critical need to adapt to a new and unfamiliar culture and the context that was represented in the immediate microsystem of students, Mrs. D was unable to cultivate the critical relationships and connect these environments to create a supportive macrosystem. The climate at School B became increasingly challenging, with behavioral issues, academic decline, and loss of community confidence. In the end, Mrs. D was unable to maintain a robust enrollment, and School B eventually closed its doors. When such school closings take place, it can create an empty hole in a community. Some studies have even indicated that neighborhoods begin to crumble when the schools that have been an oasis close. In reflection, it would seem that School B was an unfortunate example of Brofenbrenner's warning that neglecting to recognize that a change in any one of the 5 systems can significantly impact the entire ecosystem. Failure to acknowledge and attend to changes in one of the interconnected units can derail the best efforts towards the intended moral and academic impact of all collective ecosystems. A large number of the schools represented in the grant-funded university school partnerships that I was involved with were led by less experienced principals. Unfortunately, this scenario is rather common in high-needs schools. Recent research into the educational equity concerns revealed that principals in high poverty and low achieving schools are led by principals generally with less experience, while more experienced principals are concentrated in schools with low incidences of student poverty and fewer Black and Indigenous students of color. In fact, schools with a higher number of low-income students are more likely to be led by first-year principals. In addition, schools with higher proportions of impoverished and minority students tend to experience a high rate of principal turnover. School C is located in a minority neighborhood that has suffered from long-standing issues with poverty, gangs, and violence. This particular school experienced the disruptive turnover of 4 different principals during the 8 years of a university school partnership, creating a cycle of inexperienced leaders at a school already facing numerous challenges. Because leaders grow in effectiveness with each year of experience, this type of high turnover contributed to the replication of separate and unequal outcomes for the students and frustration in the larger community. Reflecting through the lens of Brofenbrenner's ecological systems theory, each of these novice school leaders struggled to lead with a moral compass at the basic microsystem level. There was an overall failure to build relationships and connections between students, teachers, parents, church, and neighborhood. Over time, the school community experienced an increasing number of behavior and criminal incidents, along with a steep decline in staff morale and academic achievement. Interestingly, in spite of the significant issues, the enrollment at School C remained relatively healthy, as parents and guardians were reluctant to send their children to the local public schools that were experiencing even more significant issues. Eventually, the archdiocesan officials stepped in, closed, and reorganized the school. Over the course of one summer, the school was closed, completely restaffed, and a new curriculum was adopted. There was a general disruption of existing unsuccessful practices, and with the support of the grant funder and the archdiocese, School C reopened in the fall with a fresh new focus and a leader that was equipped with the knowledge and skills to navigate and connect ecosystems for building a learning community that was focused on the whole child. Throughout the course of the university partnerships, the team of professors and coaches, as well as the grant funders, worked not only to provide supports during the life of the grant efforts, but also to lay a foundation for long-term sustainability. We as a team were acutely aware that improved outcomes achieved during the implementation phase of a grant project do not automatically result in long-lasting improvements. The plethora of qualitative and quantitative data collected over this decade-long experience in these three schools provided rich information revealing a number of patterns and themes. To me, perhaps the most significant lesson learned over a decade of research was that the role of the school leader is absolutely critical. In retrospect, the most successful and sustainable results were achieved in schools where the principal and/or teacher leaders understood and attended to the various interrelated ecological systems. The academic and moral development of students is a core goal for effective school leaders. However, the influence poverty has on academic, social, and emotional development of students and on the work of teachers and administrators, particularly in high-poverty schools, can present a significant challenge. For schools to be the type of institutions that promote the development of the whole student, we need leaders who understand the complicated web of human relationships that exist within the environment of each child. For many students, a nurturing school environment can add significant value to what is provided in the home and surrounding community. Schools can make a significant difference, but they cannot function alone or be disconnected from the exosystem to which they belong. One of the challenges in leadership is the need to balance the managerial and the moral imperatives. There are essential tasks that must be attended to if schools are to run safely and effectively. Each school is located within a unique context of neighborhood that serves as an interconnected, informal education space. Nonetheless, leaders, particularly in high-need schools, need to be equally focused on the moral education that is critical to the success of their students. In this sense, educational change and innovation in schools needs to take on an intentional focus on the interrelated systems that impact child development. Brofenbrenner suggested that in order to understand schools and learning with high ecological validity, school leaders need to understand, honor, and engage the various subsystems that ecologically affect the children and schools as interconnected units.